We've come to the end of our skills, so let's take the time to review what we've learned by taking this quiz. First up, and there are 5 questions. What is the driving decision between whether to deploy a 2-tier or 3-tier network architecture? Well, if we're going to have a 2-tier design, that means we're collapsing the core and distribution layers into one network block. And so, yeah, we're going to serve the access layer, and this could be 50, 100 switches. It doesn't matter how many switches there are. So we're not too worried about B. And of course, because we could have 1,000 clients hanging off of this, we also don't care about the number of end devices. What really matters is how many network blocks we're going to try to bring in to this collapsed core and distribution layer. Because if we need to have a full mesh of these other network blocks, this is going to get a little bit out of hand, and we need that true core layer to go right there in the middle. So in the end, the answer is C. We need to concern ourselves with the number of network blocks that we're going to be deploying. And typically, by the way, a lot of this comes down to how many distribution blocks that we have. Because if we have a lot of buildings in our network, then we could find ourselves with a lot of distribution layers. Up next, in an L2 access layer design, what technology enables us to take advantage of network bandwidth even on spanning tree protocol blocked links? In most layer 2 access designs, we're going to have a pair of distribution switches connecting down to access switches. And because we connect the distribution switches, we have this loop, and spanning tree is going to do its job and block one of those links. So how do we take advantage of this bandwidth? Well, the way we would take advantage of this is by deploying multiple spanning tree topologies such that, yeah, we block here on the right for maybe one VLAN, but on another VLAN, we're going to block over here on another link. And we can do this by leveraging Cisco's per VLAN spanning tree protocol, or PVST+. So the answer is C. However, it's worth noting that the industry did follow up PVST+ with MST. In most Cisco environments, we simply enable the rapid version of PVST, and so we still see a lot of PVST+ being run as opposed to MST. However, the industry standard version of multi-instance spanning tree would certainly get the job done as well. And yes, MST will be covered in a lot of detail later on in the Encore playlist. Third question, in an L3 access layer design, at what layer do the SVIs, or switched virtual interfaces, get deployed? Well, in a layer 3 edge design, we have a core layer speaking layer 3 to a distribution layer, and then that distribution layer is speaking layer 3 to the access layer. Which means that when we try to figure out where the boundary is between layer 3 and layer 2, that would be right here at the access layer. We have layer 3 upstream and we have layer 2 downstream. And because of this, our clients are still going to connect in at layer 2, but the default gateways, which typically reside up here in the distribution block, can no longer do so. They need to reside right here in the access layer. And because we use those SVIs as the default gateways, that would make our answer D. Question number 4. Which aggregation technology allows for a maximum of 2 switches to be combined into a single logical switch? Well, we have a lot of aggregation technologies at our disposal. The interesting components here are that there are 2 switches and a single logical switch. Well, stacking gives us a single logical switch, but we can stack up to 9 switches with some Cisco products. So that's not our answer. Chassis technology on its own provides us with a single logical switch, but it's only a single switch. So C isn't our answer. Now, if we take a couple of chassis switches and combine them together using VSS technology, then yes, that gives us 1 single logical switch, and we can only do VSS between 2 physical switches. So B is our answer. Interestingly enough, by the way, virtual port channeling, which is a data center technology, and we didn't cover this, so don't worry about this, but if you have experience with VPCs, yes, virtual port channeling is similar to VSS in that we can bring 2 switches together, and exactly 2 switches, and extend a single logical connection down to another device. However, the difference with VPC is when we connect these together, these are still 2 logical switches. Now again, if you don't have experience with virtual port channeling, then don't worry too much about this. This is just if you've seen it in the wild, you might be wondering why that isn't an option, but it's because we end up having still 2 distinct switches. It doesn't give us our single logical switch, which is how the question called this out. Last question, it's an open-ended one. What data center architecture allows for high scalability of layer 2 domains? Well, the answer here is spine leaf. Spine leaf is that architecture that looks a little similar to a 3-tier architecture because we have what appear to be distribution switches, except we call them spines, and we appear to have access switches, which we now call leaves. However, when we cable up this architecture, we're going to find that we actually bring every connection into the leaf switches. That means that the internet, for example, that means that the core of the network, that means anything else that we're going to connect in comes in through the leaf layer. And as we discussed, because the layer 3 services exist at the leaf layer, we can now expand the spines out to give us more network bandwidth, which, keeping in mind that the traditional 3-tier architecture, we can't expand those aggregation switches. So we're stuck at 2 aggregation in that pod architecture, which has layer 3 limitations. However, Spine Leaf gives us full scalability of layer 2 domains. So how did you do? If you ended up missing anything, be sure to go back and check out those respective videos. Otherwise, congratulations on completing Explain Enterprise Network Design. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.